Welcome to RidgeLife, I'm Tim. It's a beautiful day here in West Tennessee, and we've got the XDiavel S back from the shop. So we're going to go out on the road today in both these beautiful Ducati machines. We're getting ready for our 2020 RidgeLife Freedom Tour of the Midwest states. All of our favorite YouTube channels, we're going to be stopping by and visiting them. We've got about 20 channels on this route, so it's going to be an awesome tour coming up in June. But today we're going to get out and get on these bikes and just have some fun. I'm going to go over a few things we had done to the XDiavel and just go over some of the modifications we made. We haven't made too many. These are both awesome machines straight off the factory line. So I'll give you a little closer look. This is the XDiavel S by Ducati. It's got a 1262 cc L twin engine. It roars like a lion. It's got a lot of low-end torque. It's Ducati's first belt drive bike. So they're getting into the cruiser market around the world. You see the front foot pegs are way far forward compared to most Ducati bikes, which are right under the seat. You'll see that in our naked sport bike over there in just a second. So besides the 1262, it's got 155 horsepower stock. And we've added a racing tune and racing exhaust by Termagani. You can see those down at the bottom. It's a dual exhaust, roars like a lion. We added this tail bag. It's a Givi 20-liter tail bag, and you can see we've got our backrest on. When we take the tail bag off, the backrest can come off and a shorter back seat can be on here, so it looks real mean and sporty. Of course, you know, we add the backrest on there, 2 people ride up, a little more seat room, and of course I can put a big giant travel bag on here too, and that's what we'll do for the Freedom Tour. Some of the other awesome features of this bike, it's got launch control. Yes, I'm telling you, launch control. You can give it full throttle, set the launch control on, let the clutch out, and this thing will take control of your launch. It's amazing, awesome, crazy power too. Again, belt drive, low end torque, lower RPM than most sport bikes. You know, most sport bikes you're in the 10,000 RPM range. This thing's in the 5,000 RPM range. It's crazy. Talking about unique, look at that rear tire floating out in space like that. The wheel is amazing. Single swing arm and a beautiful Ducati rear wheel. That's just the gorgeous, gorgeous 240 millimeter rear tire. So wide and fat, but believe it or not, you got great nimbleness around corners. It's just an amazing machine. So besides the awesome racing exhaust with the up-map tune, we also added the Ducati windscreen. Just gets that wind up off your chest and gives you a little more aerodynamics at high speeds. Doesn't really do much at low speeds, you know, being so small, but I really like it being small like that. I do have a ram mount, phone mount right here below it, and it keeps the wind off the phone, keeps it warm in the wintertime, keeps it cool in the summertime as well. We also added a USB connections up here on the front left, which gives you power for your GPS and your camera, your GoPro if you're going to mount it on the front. One other awesome feature I did to it is I put the Ducati's heated grips on. The heated grips are controlled by the bike's computer. It's made by the manufacturer that way, so I added the option on later for the heated grips, and they keep you warm and toasty. I used to be able to ride down to like 40 degrees. Riding down in 30 degrees is not a problem. Again, you got no fairing and no wind protection, so having heated grips really helps. Again, I haven't really done too many modifications to this bike. It's pretty much awesome the way it is, but we've had some issues with it and done some recalls. There was a recall on the rear wheel. There's some spacers in there, and the rear wheel can be put on incorrectly, which can cause it to slip and have issues. There's also an issue with the front pulley nut. There's a washer on there that wasn't of the correct strength, and the pulley would start to fret, and that actually happened to me, and I lost the lay shaft. It caused it to fret, and all the splines sheared off. So ended up having to have the engine split open and that lay shaft replaced, but all that was taken care of by Ducati. A couple other recalls and things on it is the side stand. There was a bolt loose on the side stand. That was taken care of. There was also a key fob upgrade. We've had a Brembo master cylinder upgrade. Again, these are Ducati's taking care of the bike owners, so these things are getting ahead of and make sure that they keep you safe. So this time when I took it in, everyone knows that the Ducati's XDiavel's right or the rear brake just goes away. I mean, a lot of Ducatis are that way because of the way the rear caliper is positioned. Air can collect, but One thing they did is an upgrade is they replaced the brake lines back there in a different routing. So I had that done this last time. I also had a key fob upgrade, so the key fob has a reset button on it and should work really good, better in the gas stations when there's RF interference. I did have a leak in one of the DVT sensors when I first got it, and that was taken care of under warranty. The mirrors on these bikes, this thing has so much power and so much grunt that there's a lot of vibration, and I've had the mirrors fall off. So these mirrors, you really need to put a little bit of Loctite on the screws, otherwise you can actually have things vibrate, get loose, and break off, which has happened to me once. This bike has cornering ABS. I mean, it senses the lean angle of the bike and actually can adjust braking in cornering if you were to give it that. Just so much technology with wheelie control, I should say, traction control, the front and rear ABS. The computer on this thing, Bluetooth, so my phone, I can control my phone through my headset. I can control the headset and the phone through the controls on the bike. The computer on this thing is just amazing. With this being a belt drive bike, Ducati was trying to modify one of their original chain-driven engines to be belt drive, and we had an issue there. That Kevlar belt is super, super strong and great, but it's too close on that pulley housing to the motor. And as it comes through, the gap is just a millimeter or so. So any rock at all that gets drawn down in there can groove out your belt. And that happened to me. I've got a little groove on the outside of the belt. Gonna be fine though. It didn't go all the way through, and there's a lot of people reporting that. So that gap between the pulley and the engine housing, very, very small. A couple other small issues I've had is this rear oxygen sensor. I've had it come loose, and one of the bolts in this heat shield vibrated out and was swiveling. So if you see this vibrating and moving, you've got a screw up under the seat missing, and check your oxygen sensors to make sure they're tight as well. Since I had the screw put it back in with Loctite and the oxygen sensor put back in with Loctite, we've had no further issues. This thing, again, a lot of vibration, but it's all kept in the motor area. The dampening is done really well on this bike. I almost forgot to mention one of the issues I had, and the reason I took it in the shop was my clutch was losing its ability to disengage from the output shaft, and they bled the line and everything was fine. I haven't had any trouble since. So they did do reservoir work the last time I had it in, so maybe there was some error getting in then, and it just worked its way to where I was losing my clutch. But since they bled it, I've had no further issues. One complaint on this bike is the rear shock is really underrated for an American rider. If you're 200 pounds or more, this thing, you got to crank the nut to tighten that spring up really, really high. They do have some new aftermarket rear shocks for it to improve that. I got mine cranked pretty tight so I don't bottom out. It's like 9,500 miles between service intervals in this thing, which is crazy. And at the 18,000, the second interval is when you do your lifter check. It's pretty awesome. I do an intermediate oil change myself in between the Ducati oil chains. I did have my front fork seals leaking, and I had that fixed on the last time I took it in. With this thing having these forward foot controls, they are adjustable for different height persons. I've got mine on the farthest back. I'm only about 5'10". I like to have my feet lifted up a little bit more off the seat so on long rides it doesn't cut my circulation off. But tall people can extend that out to the farthest position. There's 3 positions, and get a lot of leg room. One modification I almost failed to mention with these Evotech grill covers. The radiators are exposed on this bike from the factory, and these painted metal grill covers really protect from rock chips and denting and leaks on your radiators. And I haven't had any chips or cracks in them yet. It looks really, really good. This is an awesome machine. I love it. I love it to death. I'll probably get another one here later on. I'm putting about 10,000, 15,000 miles a year on this thing. Let's move over to the Monster and I'll show you that bike. For the few modifications we did do, I went with the Rhizoma, and we put the Rhizoma frame slider on, the Rhizoma front wheel slider. The Rhizoma, those are the pegs for lifting the rear, and they also act like a slider a little bit. We put Rhizoma levers on, both the clutch and the brake. That's it really for modifications on this bike. We haven't had too many issues with it. The rear brake on it has the Ducati issue where it needs to be bled pretty often. One trick I've found is you can hold down the rear brake, tie it down in the pressurized position, come back a day or so, and you actually will have a rear brake operation again. It's pretty crazy how that pressure does that, forcing those air bubbles up. But it works, but there is a modification to that Ducati's got out, and next time we get in for service, we're going to do that as well. One thing I didn't mention on the XDiavel is the reservoirs. The reservoirs leak bad on the Diablo and the XDiavel, and they're painted reservoirs, so those painted surfaces do peel off, and Ducati is replacing those. I had them replaced a couple times on my Diablo and a couple times on the XDiavel. On the Monster, the top cap is painted also. We've had a little leakage and peeling, but it's not near as bad. With both bikes, the computers are awesome. This one doesn't have the color display, but it is really a nice display, and it does have a really good computer with ABS and traction control. One cool thing on both bikes is to set the riding modes. If it starts to rain, I can turn the traction control up so it doesn't have as much wheel grunt and will allow for slippage a little bit more. You can adjust the ABS. There's a sport mode, a touring mode, and an urban mode. Usually when it rains, I'll throw it in urban mode, so it's just as much protected. You can adjust all these settings for customs mode or adjust the individual preset modes as well. You can actually adjust the throttle response as well. These are ride-by-wire throttles, so you can adjust how much motor output for an amount of movement of the throttle. Basically, you can prevent whiskey throttling a little bit if you say. You can also adjust the horsepower output of these machines. You can go from 112 horsepower, I think, on this thing, down to like 80 some odd horsepower, and on mine you can go from the 155 down as well. You can adjust that horsepower output. Her bike here, again, I call it a naked sport bike, so your feet position is below you, a little bit less on an aggressive sport bike, but it's a comfortable riding position. You are a little more body forward, but it's really short wheelbase and nimble. You know, mine's longer, got a longer rake on it. It's just power down the road, and this one is a lot less torquey and powerful, but awesome and nimble around the corners. This is a chain-driven bike, so you do have chain maintenance associated with it. We oil it like every 300 miles and clean it every 600, which keeps the chain in good condition. You can see the rear tire dimension differences from the XDiavel S 240 millimeter rear tire over to the Monster, which is much smaller. I don't actually know the diameter of that one, but it's got good grip and looks decent. But man, that fat rear tire on the XDiavel S is just amazing. We'll give you a sound comparison of the XDiavel S with a Termagani racing exhaust, and then we'll let you listen to the 821 Monster's stock exhaust. All right, here's the XDiavel S Termagani exhaust. There's cold start and idle. Give it a little bit of a rev and cold start. That sounded amazing. And the overrun on it is crazy as well. When you're coming to a stop sign and you downshift and pull the clutch in, the overrun just pop, 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 rumble, rumble, rumble. It is amazing. At nighttime, you can see the fire blowing out the holes on the exhaust too. It's pretty cool. Of course, every dog in the neighborhood starts to bark now. Now we're going to move on to the Monster 821 stock exhaust cold start. Not near as loud, for sure. Got a nice thud to it. Of course, my camera is not picking up a low rumble like these things that Ducati's put out. That low rumble is what makes the Ducati L-Twin sound so good. But this thing sounds really good stock. Listen to this. This is rev and cold start. Now you can tell it's a little higher RPM engine than the XDiavel. Not near as high in RPM as the Super Leggera or a Panigale, but the XDiavel idles at much lower RPM, and you actually can cruise at a much lower RPM. Whereas on a sport bike, you just can't get that slow cruise. But the torque of the XDiavel is amazing. The nimbleness of the Monster 821 is amazing. I'm going to do the XDiavel exhaust one more time for y'all. Here we go. XDiavel S one more time. This thing has got so much engine torque. The whole bike was moving back, and my ears, I don't have my earplugs in, my ears, the compression, the feeling of power coming out of this exhaust is amazing. I need to clean out the exhaust for sure. quite dirty down here. I need to wash the whole bike. You're getting a closer view than I was hoping, but this thing's got a lot of road grime on it. But man, what a sound on this exhaust. And that rear wheel, guys, that rear wheel is dirty, but amazing looking. Love this bike. Again, we love our Ducatis, and we're going to get on the road here just shortly, and you'll get to watch us ride.
had a wonderful meal here at Bozo's Barbecue. They're open 50% capacity. It was a wonderful, wonderful meal. We're going to get back on the road.